probably more, but that makes its point. Starbucks Farmer Support Centers, technical support through Farmer Support Center. Starbucks opened our Farmer Support Center in Central America in 2004, and it's had such great success in terms of what it's done for the coffee-growing communities that we opened one in Rwanda last year. And then we've just, as you know, signed a license agreement with Ethiopia, the country in Ethiopia, and have committed to opening up a support center in their capital city as well. So the Farmer Support Center houses... Okay, I got 2 minutes left, and I think I only have 2 slides left. So I'm going to do that. The Farmer Support Center houses a team of experts in soil management, field crop production, coffee quality, green coffee sustainability to improve coffee farmers' livelihoods and their future to supply high-quality coffee. So, sustainable procurement. In addition to CAFE practices guidelines with coffee, we do similar with our cocoa sourcing. We've purchased over 15 million pounds of cocoa, primarily from the Ivory Coast. We've launched Starbucks Social Responsibility Cocoa Sourcing, SSRC, a pilot program in the Ivory Coast. And we've completed a new draft on cocoa practice sourcing guidelines. We also do it with tea. So we've joined an ethical tea partnership to ensure that all the teas that we produce are produced in a very social, responsible way. We began purchasing tea from a small tea growers to develop close ties with tea-growing communities in and around the Himalaya foothills in Darjeeling in India. And I don't know if you know, but we sell Tazo tea exclusively, and we do own Tazo tea company. Dairy products, this is huge. It's big. This year, as you know or may not know, Starbucks went to 2%. Coffee is our default, milk is our default milk. So unless you ask otherwise, you'll get 2% in your milk. And we're also setting a goal by the end of 2008 to require all of our all of our milk producers to have RBGH-free or hormone-free. The challenge that we have with that is that we can't get enough of it. The milk producers that we buy from aren't able to produce enough of it just yet. So thank you. I tried to do that in 5 minutes.
I want to thank Cherie so much for candidly speaking with us. And again, as Bill mentioned, the courage to perhaps be entering what some may call the lion's den. So I also want to take a brief pause right now to let anybody know that any questions, just write it on a slip of paper, pass it forward to Gracie or one of the people, I'm sorry, right here. Send it to her or one of the people over here, and I will promptly speak out your question. I'm going to introduce Peter Bell for hopefully what will be a short presentation. The two of them will also have a short time to respond to each other, and then I will continue in questioning both of them depending on your questions and maybe a couple of mine that I've noted from the film as well. Without further ado, Peter Bell.
And I would echo the thanks to Cherie for coming and talking about Starbucks. Actually, a lot of what she said is on their website, and I take it largely to be PR, most of it, although because there's not a lot of documentation about how they're getting the money to the farmers, as far as I could tell. Certainly they're engaging in charitable efforts, and they're doing a lot of efforts in terms of some of the things you saw, but they're very small. The problem is huge, and it seems to me that corporations like Starbucks, as well as, a lot of what I'm about to say is really not about them, but about the large coffee suppliers, the really big ones. Corporations like this, it seems to me, should be absolutely shamed by the information that's contained in this movie. That they are engaging in process of advocating free trade arrangements in countries in which people are literally starving. And it seems to me a lot of other things that they can do and that we should ask them to do before we do business with them. It turns out that in Ethiopia, some of the most poignant data, which we saw sort of vaguely on the film, but let me just mention a couple of things. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. Its average per capita income is about $100 a year. 40% of the people in Ethiopia live below the poverty line. 40%. You can tell they can't afford schools. This is not the result of coffee buyers, but it persists because of their failure to act in a moral way. But it's not their fault that they buy at international prices. 26 million people in Ethiopia, 25% of them, 25% of the whole country live in some sense dependent on coffee production. The literacy rate is 43% of the population, 50% for men and 35% for women. There's obviously an absence of cooperatives. We saw small amounts of American aid, which is $50 million last year, was given back in the form of rice handouts. In 1999, the Ethiopian, or actually African countries in general, but including Ethiopia, signed an agreement to promote more free trade of the kind that was being discussed in Cancun. We provide very little foreign aid around the world, but we do give a small amount of food aid to Ethiopia, as you saw. I can't quite figure out what's going on along the supply chain. So one question that I would want to look at, I would ask Starbucks what are their profits last year? It looked like from what Keen just showed me, they were about $500 million. CEO made $16 million. I would want to know how they translate the promise of getting profits to the growers when the average price paid in Ethiopia, according to the International Coffee Organization data, in 2007 was between 20 and 30 cents a kilo. 20 to 30 cents a kilo. I don't know how much coffee is bought from Ethiopia by Starbucks, but the claim that they're paying $1.40, I think you said a pound actually, not a kilo, from growers around the world. I don't know what they're paying in Ethiopia, but it can't be much above the average that the International Coffee Association, which is of growers, it's of buyers, excuse me, it's not of growers, has indicated. Ethiopia is so poor that it was one of the 50 countries that was forgiven its foreign debt. The highly impoverished countries of Africa were forgiven their debt. In the case of Ethiopia, that was a debt forgiveness of about $70 million. I want to ask now a couple of questions. I'm going to try to restrict myself to the time that was assigned, by the way, which was, at my suggestion, 5 minutes each. And I think it's very important that you get a chance to ask questions, and I hope you're writing them down because there are many that I cannot ask, and I've asked Keen to ask some. I want to know about the profits. I want to know about how this is going down the supply chain and how it has affected the average price in Ethiopia of 30 cents a kilo for coffee, because if Starbucks is doing something completely different, it's certainly not showing up in the data. And I'd like to see how they're passing the profits down the chain. Because there is, as we saw, a 6-step global supply chain from farmer to Starbucks coffee consumer. 27 cents a kilo translates into $300 per kilo by the time it reaches you as a consumer. 27 cents or 30 cents a kilo to $300 a kilo by the time it's translated into cups of coffee. Okay, I mean, where is that going? It seems to me that this requires a little bit of explanation. Again, we're not blaming Starbucks for this. We're talking about a global supply chain system. We're talking about the absence of a lot of cooperatives. But I'm not at all clear, by the way, that fair trade can only be conducted with small producers. That's a terrifically important thing for us to be clear on, because from what we've seen about fair trade, and what Keen will show you in a minute, is that fair trade can be approved by companies that meet certain regulations. Not in terms of size, and this includes, as far as we understand it, coffee companies. So the claim that Starbucks can only buy 6% fair trade coffee because they can't find it, because they can only buy from restricted numbers of small producers, seems highly problematic. in terms of what we've seen fair trade certification to mean for garments as well as coffee, which is that you have to meet a series of regulations.